Hi everyone, welcome to this video on chapter 1. We're looking at the very beginning of chapter 1. We're going to talk about simple interest today. Now just a bit of a background into what interest is and what happens when you approach a bank or go to a bank to borrow some money. You may go to a bank to borrow money, for example, to buy a car or a house or anything you want. What happens is you borrow that money, and that money is called your principal. So that's the term given to the original amount of money borrowed. That's how much you get from the bank. It's called the principal, and we'll be using that term a lot throughout this particular chapter. When you borrow that money, you'll be paying it back to the bank, but you'll be paying it back with interest. Now, if you're not sure what interest means, that is the extra money that you pay on top of the principal. So you borrow back, let's say, for example, $5,000 from the bank to buy a car. But you will pay that back to the bank because you are borrowing it. You have to pay it back to the bank with interest. So you pay extra money on top of that. That is called your interest. This is expressed as a percentage, and it's per annum. Per annum just means per year or for each year. It's a Latin term, means per year. Now what happens is, like I said, you can go and borrow money from a bank for a number of reasons, but you can also put money into a bank account. When you do that, the bank actually uses that money to give it to other people, to lend it to other people. So when they do this, you've probably heard of bank accounts, or you might have a bank account where it gains interest. For the longer you keep it in that account, the more interest you get. So what happens is the bank is using the money that you put into that account, it's giving it to other people, it's loaning it to other people, but in return, the bank actually gives you interest. So you're making money for nothing. This takes a long time, and you need to have a lot of money in that account to actually get a big return. But that's a story for another day. Let's have a look at what we need to do here today. So we're looking at calculating simple interest. So we want to work out how much interest we are paying when we borrow a certain amount of money. This depends on a couple of things. First of all, our principal. Like I said, the principal is the amount of money that you actually borrow in the beginning. It also depends on the interest rate. And finally, it depends on how long you're borrowing it for. Our formula there, which I suggest you copy down and have on cheat sheets for topic tests and exams, that's our formula for simple interest. So what you need to do is you need to know the principal, how much money you borrowed in the beginning. You need to know the interest rate, and you need to know how long in years this money is being borrowed for. And all you do is you times those three numbers. You multiply those three numbers. So simple interest equals principal times interest rate times the time in years. So how much have we repaid on a loan? We want to work out how much we actually pay back in total. The formula that we use looks something like that. It's A equals P plus I. We know what P is. P is always the same thing throughout this particular chapter. P is our principal, how much money we borrowed in the first place. A is what we're trying to figure out. It's the total amount that we've repaid. P, like I said, is our principal, and I is the simple interest, so how much interest we've paid. So basically, to work out how much total, or what the total amount that we've paid is, we need to add the principal plus our simple interest. Let's have a look at a quick example together now. So if I go out to a bank and borrow $20,000 over 5 years because I want to buy a new car, the interest rate that the bank is giving me that money for is 9.5% per annum. So every year I have to pay 9.5% extra on top of my principal. The question says, calculate the amount of interest charged. A couple of steps that we need to follow. First of all, this makes it very simple. We need to know what we are actually calculating. What are we working out? That's what we need to decide. In this particular case, it's I. If you remember back to our formula, I is the amount of simple interest. That's what we want to know. That's what the question says. Step number 2. What's our formula that we use? I wonder. It's that one right there. Simple interest equals principal times the our rate as a decimal, and we'll go into that in a second, times how long we're borrowing it for in years. So let's substitute the numbers that we're given from the question into our formula. We've got our letters there, what our pronumerals, what they stand for. P, our principal, is $20,000 because that's how much we are borrowing. The rate, R, is 9.5%. And for how long, our T is 5 years. So our final step, we simply calculate our simple interest. So we plug in those numbers into our formula. So we have $20,000 times 0.095. Now that comes from our interest rate, but we have to write that as a decimal. Very, very important. You can't put in 9.5 into the formula because you'll get the wrong answer. You have to write it as a decimal. Very important. And then times that by how long we're borrowing it for, which in this case is 5 years. When you plug all those numbers into the calculator, what comes out is $9,500. So the amount of interest that we're paying when we borrow that amount of money is $9,500. That's a lot of money. It's almost half of how much you're borrowing. So, next question. Following on from that, what is the total amount that I will be paying at the end of the loan? So remember, I borrowed $20,000 over 5 years. So at the end of that 5 years, I have to be finished with paying it off. And the rate was 9.5. Let's have a look at the steps again. Just like before, what are we calculating? What are we working out? In this case, it's A, which stands for the total amount repaid. Second step, we write down our formula. A equals P plus I. P was our principal, how much we borrowed to begin with, and I was our simple interest. All we need to do is add those two numbers up. P we already know from the question because I told you I borrowed $20,000. And I was what we worked out in the previous step. It was our interest. So we plug in those numbers into the formula. So the total amount that we've repaid after 5 years is $29,500. So I only borrowed $20,000 to buy my car. But at the end of the 5 years, I'll be paying the bank an extra $9,500. That's a lot of money. And that's how banks make their money. That's why they're so rich. Quick little side note, these two formulas that we talked about today, so the formula to work out our simple interest, or I, and to work out the total amount that we've repaid, you can actually rearrange these. So what I mean by that is if you want to work out, for example, the principal, if you want to work out P from that top formula over here, if you want to work out P and you know what the interest rate, the time, and the simple interest was. So if you know these three things, the numbers for these, you can rearrange that and work out how much that person actually borrowed to begin with. You can rearrange it. Same goes for this second formula over here. If you know at least two of these letters, these pronumerals, if you know at least two of them, you can work out the other one. Okay, so just keep that in mind because there might be a couple of questions where you'll have to do that. Let's talk about briefly about compound interest. Compound interest is designed to make the amount of interest grow bigger and bigger by increasing the principal, so increasing how much you've paid. Now there's a great example of this on page 6 of your textbook, but basically what happens is it works in two simple steps. What compound interest does works in two steps. First of all, you calculate at the end of the time period the interest on the principal for that particular time period, and then you add this interest to the principal again to make the new principal for the next time period. So it's basically adding more and more interest as you go along. So the longer you have it, the more you pay off. Okay, please go to page 6 just to see a quick example there. It's about half a page, a little example to see. Now we actually have a formula. I know I've given you a lot of formulas today, but like I said, please make sure you copy them down into your book. We actually have a formula for calculating the compound interest. So if you want to know how much you've paid, we have a formula for it. Again, A is the total amount that you've paid, or total amount of interest. P is our principal, like I said, P stays the same. The R is the rate, or the interest rate, again, just like before, and T is time in years. So there's our little formula there. You'll need to know that for some of the questions if you want to know or work out the amount of interest, compound interest in this case. Before I go, one other little equation which relates to compound interest there is I. So if you want to work out the amount of compound interest owned or earned, depending whose perspective you're looking at. You just need to do A minus P. A is the amount of the loan, and P again is our interest. So you just do the amount of loan minus the principal. That's about it for this video, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Just remember that you can always go back and forth and pause videos and go back to formulas and examples and view them again and again if you need more of an explanation. Hope you enjoyed it. See you in class, guys.